Let me tell you about the day the universe decided to mess with humanity. Not in the typical alien invasion kind of way, mind you. No. This was far more idiotic and, honestly, way funnier when you really think about it. So there I was, Captain Marcus Webb, floating through the Kepler sector on what should have been a routine diplomatic mission. My crew consisted of me, a medical officer named Jessica, an engineer called Derek. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. And about 50 combat troops, who were mostly just there to look intimidating. Spoiler alert, they failed spectacularly at their job. We were headed to Zephyr Prime to negotiate some kind of trade agreement with the native population, the Velrathi. These guys looked like giant cats if giant cats had evolved tentacles and a penchant for honor-based combat systems. Real classy folks. Everything was going perfectly fine until we received a distress signal from the research station at Kepler 17b. And I do mean distress. The signal started with someone screaming, followed by what sounded like an actual roaring noise, and then the communications officer just going, "Oh no. Oh no, 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 no." That's when I knew we had a genuine problem. The research station was supposed to be empty, just automated systems maintaining some biological specimens. But apparently, someone failed to read the memo, and Dr. Eleanor Vance, our resident xenobiologist genius, had been conducting field research there without informing command. You know, the usual maverick scientist stuff. She'd discovered something groundbreaking on Kepler 17b, something that would revolutionize our understanding of biology. Unfortunately for her, what she'd discovered could also bite, scratch, claw, and apparently roar with the fury of 1,000 angry gods. The species was called the Sarath by the local population. Imagine the unholy offspring of a lion and a bear. Add in the predatory intelligence of a particularly vindictive accountant. Multiply that by about 8 feet of pure muscle and teeth, and you're getting close to what these things looked like. They were also, as it turned out, absolutely furious with the scientific community for reasons nobody was entirely clear about. Something about a historical incident involving cages and inadequate research ethics. Hey, don't look at me. I didn't put them in cages. When we arrived at the station, Dr. Vance was holed up in the main laboratory with 3 baby Sarath cubs. Not adult Sarath, cubs. Which in hindsight was somehow worse because that meant the mother was still alive, still capable of breeding, and absolutely convinced that we had kidnapped her children. Which, technically, we hadn't because Dr. Vance had rescued them from some kind of poaching operation. But try explaining that to a creature that weighs roughly 2.5 tons and has the temperament of a scorned opera singer. The mother, who we later named Ravenna because, hey, she was a magnificent creature even when she was trying to murder us, had the research station surrounded. She'd already taken out most of the station's exterior defenses, torn through 2 walls, and was currently making it very clear that she would not be leaving without her babies. On the plus side, she hadn't actually killed anyone yet. On the minus side, it was only a matter of time. Jessica met me in the briefing room with what can only be described as controlled panic spread across her face. "Sir, Dr. Vance is refusing to leave the cubs. She says they're malnourished and traumatized from the poachers. She wants to monitor them for at least 2 weeks before she'll consider releasing them back to the mother. I say this with complete and utter certainty, sir, that the mother Sarath will not wait 2 weeks." "How certain?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Certain enough to update my will, sir. I'm leaving my favorite coffee mug to Derek, that asshole." Derek, standing in the corner of the briefing room like some kind of engineering ghost, just gave us a thumbs up. Derek was the kind of guy who found humor in absolutely everything, including probable death scenarios. I'll treasure it, Jessica. I'll drink my morning coffee out of that mug every day and remember you fondly. That's why I'm leaving it to you, you idiot. I hate both of you. Despite the situation being approximately 17 different kinds of terrible, I found myself grinning. This was why I loved my crew. We were about to potentially start an intergalactic incident that could destroy diplomatic relations with the Velrathi, who were now observing the whole situation with detached fascination, and we were just cracking jokes about coffee mugs and wills. The Velrathi had arrived about an hour after us, which made things even more complicated. Their delegation, led by Ambassador Krell, a particularly intimidating specimen with scars across most of his face and eyes that had seen things that would make most humans weep, expressed great interest in how we would handle the situation. By interested, I mean they sat there with these satisfied expressions on their faces like they were watching entertainment. Because apparently, to the Velrathi, watching humans attempt to navigate a complex social biological crisis while trying not to get eaten was peak entertainment. Your species finds itself in quite the predicament, Krell observed, with what might have been amusement in his voice. It was hard to tell with Velrathi. Their vocal range included frequencies that humans couldn't properly perceive, so you were always kind of guessing at the emotional subtext. The Sarath mother will not negotiate. She will not listen to reason. She will only take her cubs and leave. If the cubs are harmed, she will likely destroy everything in a 5-mile radius out of spite. Thanks for the rundown, Ambassador. Really appreciated. Very helpful, I said, trying to figure out how I was going to explain to my commanding officer that I'd accidentally started an interspecies custody battle. I should also mention, Krell continued, his mandibles clicking together in what I was pretty sure was the Velrathi equivalent of a chuckle, that the Sarath cubs are, by their species standards, considered extremely valuable. Their mother was once a legendary hunter. There are old pacts between species regarding such creatures. If she falls in battle protecting them, several historical treaties activate. This would be, how do you say, inconvenient for everyone. How inconvenient? I asked, though I really didn't want to know. Mildly apocalyptic, Krell said. For the next 100 years, any human colony within Velrathi space would be subject to territorial disputes. The Sarath would likely invoke their right to hunt humans on sight within 3 sectors. The Quarathi would use it as justification to expand their borders. Really, the domino effect would be quite spectacular. I looked at Jessica. Jessica looked at Derek. Derek looked at his coffee, which he'd brought with him, even though we were supposed to be in a crisis management situation. Then I looked back at the readout, showing Ravenna pacing around the research station like an angry storm. So, what you're telling me is that if we don't get those cubs back to their mother safely, we potentially kick off an interstellar conflict that could result in thousands of deaths and years of political instability. Essentially, Krell confirmed. Though I must say, if you manage to avoid this outcome, it would be quite impressive. Your species has a remarkable talent for accidentally creating chaos. Yeah, well, we're also pretty good at talking our way out of situations, I said, though I had absolutely no idea how I was going to talk my way out of this one. Derek, I need you to reinforce the exterior walls. Jessica, I need you to prepare the medical bay for potential Sarath injuries. We're not getting eaten on my watch. Ambassador Krell, I'm going to need your species' historical knowledge of Sarath behavior. Fascinating, Krell said, his tail swishing with what I assumed was satisfaction. You intend to attempt diplomacy with an apex predator, This should be entertaining. I'm glad my potential demise entertains you, I muttered, already heading toward the communication station. Here's the thing about humans that most species don't seem to fully grasp. We're stubborn. Stupid stubborn. The kind of stubborn that makes us try things that have exactly zero probability of working because we're too idiotic to know better. It's not bravery. It's not courage. It's just a fundamental inability to accept defeat until we've exhausted literally every possible option and then invented a few new ones on the spot. So I did what any reasonable captain in an unreasonable situation would do. I put on my dress uniform, grabbed a data pad with some photos of the cubs, and I walked right out of the research station toward Ravenna. Jessica screamed my name. Derek just sighed and muttered something about updating his will too. Ambassador Krell actually stood up, which was the Velrothi equivalent of genuine surprise. Even the Sarath mother paused, which I took as a good sign that I hadn't immediately been classified as food. "Hey," I said, keeping my hands visible and my voice steady even though my heart was doing backflips and my hands were sweating like I'd just run a marathon. "I'm Captain Marcus Webb. I'm in charge of the humans here. I want to talk to you about your cubs." Ravenna's ears swiveled toward me. She was even more impressive up close, which was saying something because she was already terrifying from a distance. Her fur was matted with blood that wasn't hers. Her eyes were this piercing yellow that seemed to look right through me. When she exhaled, the breath smelled like iron and fury. "You take," she rumbled, her voice deeper than I expected and hitting frequencies that made my internal organs vibrate. "You take babies. You do test. You do hurt. I know. I know you're kind." "We didn't hurt them," I said, keeping my voice even. "Dr. Vance rescued them. They were in cages. They were starving. We wanted to help." "Help?" Ravenna repeated, and she actually laughed. It was a terrible sound, like rocks grinding together. "Help. You take from Mother, you take from Pack, and you say help. This is what you call help?" "I know this looks bad," I said, which was possibly the understatement of the century. Here I was, standing in the middle of a barren research station, talking to a creature that could literally bite my head off with minimal effort, discussing parenting and ethics. "But your cubs are safe. They're being cared for by one of the smartest people I know. They're being fed proper nutrition. They're being treated with respect. All I'm asking is that you let us keep them for a little while longer, just until they're strong enough to survive on their own." "They are strong enough now," Ravenna said. "They have their mother. They need nothing else." This is where most humans would have given up and accepted their fate. But I had an idea, and it was either the best idea I'd ever had or it was going to get me killed. There wasn't really a middle ground. "Come inside," I said. "See for yourself. If you don't believe me, if you think we're lying, then we'll give you the cubs right now, no questions asked. But I'm betting that you're smarter than that. I'm betting that you know a healthy cub from a sick one. I'm betting that you'll see that we're telling the truth." For a long moment, Ravenna just stared at me. I could feel the weight of her gaze, the predatory assessment happening behind those yellow eyes. I could see her muscles tensing, could see her processing approximately 1,000,000 different ways to kill me. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed again, but this time it was different. There was something almost like respect in it. "You have courage," she said, "or stupidity." "Probably stupidity. But I will see. Show me." Walking back into the research station with a Sarath mother the size of a small building is not an experience I'd recommend to anyone. Derek's face when I walked through the door with Ravenna actually paled to this sickly shade of white. Jessica's eyes went wide, and I heard her mutter a prayer to multiple deities simultaneously. Dr. Vance, when she saw us, looked like she was going to have a heart attack, which would have been terrible timing. The cubs were in the medical bay, hooked up to various IV lines and nutritional supplements. They looked small and fragile compared to their mother, their fur not yet fully grown in, their eyes still adjusting to being outside of cages. When they saw Ravenna, their reaction was instantaneous and heartbreaking. They started crying, these little bleating sounds that were somehow even more pathetic than their mother's roar. Ravenna's entire demeanor changed. The predator, the mother, walked toward her cubs with this careful, gentle movement that seemed impossible for something so large. She lowered her massive head and nuzzled each cub, checking them over with surprising tenderness. "They are thin," she observed, her voice softer than before. "But they are alive. They are not broken." "They're going to be fine," Dr. Vance said, stepping forward with the confidence of someone who had clearly lost all sense of self-preservation. They were undernourished, possibly dehydrated, definitely traumatized. But with proper nutrition and time, they'll make a full recovery. They're strong cubs, I can see that. They get that from their mother. Ravenna looked at Dr. Vance for a long moment. "You keep them from pain. You keep them from death." "Yes," Dr. Vance said. "Why? Your kind does not usually show such kindness to my kind. Your kind cages us. Your kind hunts us." "Some of my kind," Dr. Vance corrected, "but not all of us. Some of us believe that all life, regardless of species, deserves respect and care. I became a scientist because I wanted to protect species like yours. I wanted to study you, yes, but to help you, to understand you. There's a difference between curiosity and cruelty." Ravenna made a sound that might have been understanding or might have been the prelude to tearing everyone in the room apart. It was genuinely unclear. 2 weeks, Ravenna said finally. 2 weeks my cubs stay. I stay also. I watch, I make sure. If they are harmed, I will take payment from your flesh. "Fair deal," I said, because apparently I was now agreeing to be collateral in an interspecies medical experiment. The next 2 weeks were simultaneously the best and worst of my career. On the one hand, we successfully integrated a Sarath mother into a human-operated research station without anyone dying, which was a tremendous achievement. On the other hand, no one slept because Ravenna was basically the most terrifying roommate in the history of roommates. She would pace at night. She would make these growling sounds when she thought her cubs weren't being fed fast enough. She actually attacked Derek once when he got between her and one of the cubs, though he managed to escape with only a minor slash wound and an even more appropriate level of respect for large predatory creatures. The Velrothi delegation stayed for the entire 2 weeks, and Krell made comments like, "This is far more entertaining than watching your species on the news feeds." But something unexpected happened during those 2 weeks. Ravenna started to trust us, started to understand that we weren't the enemy. She watched Dr. Vance work with her cubs, saw them getting stronger, saw their eyes become more alert and their movements more sure. On day 11, one of the cubs actually played with Jessica, pouncing on her shoe like it was a toy. Ravenna watched that happen and made this sound that I was pretty sure was contentment. It was Derek, of all people, who managed to create a genuine moment of connection. He was working on reinforcing some of the damaged walls, and one of the cubs wandered over to investigate his tools. Instead of shooing it away, Derek just sat down and let the cub explore. He showed it how the tools worked, making exaggerated movements and silly sounds. The cubs seemed to find this hilarious, and soon both cubs were playing with Derek like he was some kind of giant toy that happened to have a PhD in engineering. Ravenna watched Derek play with her cubs, and she did something remarkable. She sat down next to him, her massive form dwarfing him completely, and she just sat there, not threatening, not guarding, just present, like a mother watching her children play in the park. "You are strange, human," Ravenna said to Derek later that day. "Most humans we encounter have fear. You have curiosity. You want to learn about my kind, about my cubs. Why?" "Because they're neat," Derek said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "And you're neat too. I mean, you're terrifying, and I've reevaluated my life choices multiple times since you arrived. But you're also clearly intelligent, and you care about your kids. That's neat. My species is all about seeking out neat things and learning about them. We're basically curious to a fault." "Curious to a fault," Ravenna repeated. "Yes, this describes your kind well. But this curiosity has allowed you to create weapons, to build empires, to harm, and also to help," Derek said. "Same curiosity that makes us want to build weapons also makes us want to build hospitals, makes us want to understand diseases so we can cure them, makes us want to study creatures like you so we can protect them instead of hunt them. It all comes from the same place. We're just weird like that." Ravenna was quiet for a long time after that. Then she made this sound that was almost like a sigh. "Your species is contradictory. You contain multitudes. I do not fully understand. But I am beginning to see why the Velrati find you so interesting." By day 14, the cubs were visibly stronger. Their fur had thickened. Their movements were more confident. They were eating solid food now instead of just the nutritional supplements. Dr. Vance ran her final tests and confirmed that they were ready to return to the wild, ready to survive with their mother, ready to eventually grow into the legendary hunters that their bloodline apparently produced. On the evening before they were supposed to leave, Ravenna did something none of us expected. She presented Dr. Vance with something. It was a claw. One of her own claws, removed cleanly and somehow polished to a shine. It was an offering, a gift. Among Sarath culture, we would later learn, this was an honor reserved for those who had saved the lives of family members. "You have earned respect of Sarath," Ravenna said. "You are friend of Sarath now. If you ever need aid, you call on us. We will answer." I watched Dr. Vance take that claw, and I saw tears streaming down her face. Not sad tears. The good kind. The kind that come when you realize that you've genuinely made a difference in someone's life. Or in this case, someone's cubs' lives. On the morning of departure, there was this moment where Ravenna looked at each of us in turn. She looked at me and said, "You have courage and stupidity. Use them wisely." She looked at Jessica and said, "Your kindness is not weakness. Keep it." She looked at Derek and said, "You play like cub. This is good. Your species needs more of this." Then she gathered her cubs, now fully recovered and bouncing with the energy of healthy youngsters, and she walked out into the Kepler 17b wilderness. We watched from the research station as she disappeared into the dense forest with her family. And somehow, everyone's eyes were a little misty watching her go. Ambassador Krell approached me as we prepared to leave the research station. "That was a remarkable display of diplomacy," he said. "Most species would have attempted military force. You attempted understanding." "We tried stupidity first," I said. "It just happened to work out." "Yes, well, stupidity is your species' greatest strength and greatest weakness," Krell said. You are willing to attempt things that other species consider illogical because you do not fully understand the constraints of the situation. Sometimes this results in disaster. Apparently, sometimes it results in peace. The incident report I filed was approximately 50 pages long and included phrases like unconventional diplomatic approach and risk assessment failure, and outstanding outcome despite significant protocol violations. My commanding officer recommended me for commendation, then threatened to court-martial me, then ultimately decided to just let the whole thing go because explaining it to anyone else would make everyone involved sound insane. But that wasn't really the end of the story. About a month later, we received a message through the Velrothi communication network. It was from Ravenna. She'd had another cub, a female, and she'd named her Marcella, as a tribute to human stubbornness, apparently. Dr. Vance got a message too, and in it Ravenna mentioned that her cubs, now fully grown, were helping her protect other Sarath from poachers. They were teaching younger generations about humans who had helped them, about humans who had shown kindness instead of cruelty. Derek actually put a picture of that polished claw that Ravenna had given Dr. Vance on his workstation. Every time someone asked about it, he would tell them the story of how a human scientist, a captain with more guts than sense, an engineer with a way of talking to creatures that nobody else could reach, and an entire research station full of people had managed to prevent an interstellar incident by doing the most human thing possible. We decided to care about something other than our own immediate survival. Jessica eventually used that anecdote to write a paper on interspecies diplomacy that somehow made it into several academic journals. Krell cited her paper in some Velrothi diplomatic presentations, which was apparently a huge honor. And Dr. Vance. She went on to establish the first research program dedicated to understanding apex predator psychology in complex social structures, with Ravenna's family as her primary subjects and collaborative partners. If you think about it, the whole thing was a monumental display of human illogic. We should have been terrified. We should have called in the military. We should have treated the Sarath mother as a threat instead of as a parent trying to protect her family. But we didn't. We did something that made approximately 0 sense from a survival standpoint. We treated the enemy as a potential friend. And that, more than any weapon or technology or strategic military advantage, is what makes humanity actually worth something in this universe. We're the species that will walk out toward the monster because we believe there might be a conversation instead of a battle. Sometimes we're right. Sometimes we're catastrophically wrong. But we keep doing it anyway, because somewhere deep in our DNA, we seem to believe that everything worth understanding is worth approaching with curiosity instead of violence. Ravenna told Derek before she left that we were strange. She was right. We're strange. We're also, it turns out, exactly strange enough to survive in a universe full of creatures that make more sense than we do. We trip through the cosmos, leaving a trail of improbable victories and bizarre friendships, making friends with creatures that should be eating us. And somehow that's made humanity essential to the galactic community. The cubs bled in battle, wounded and orphaned by human cruelty. But humanity brought them home, not through force, not through intellect, not through military might, but through something far more powerful. We brought them home through sheer, absolute, unrelenting stubbornness and a refusal to accept that violence was the only language that mattered. And if that's not the most human thing that could possibly be said about us, then I honestly don't know what is. So that's the story of how Captain Marcus Webb, Dr. Eleanor Vance, Jessica from Medical, Derek the engineer, and one very large Sarath mother named Ravenna prevented an interstellar incident by deciding that curiosity and compassion were worth more than caution and fear. Make of that what you will. But if the universe is asking if humanity deserves a seat at the table with the other galactic powers, I'd say we've already earned it just by proving that we're capable of being weird enough, stubborn enough, and stupid enough to choose understanding over conflict every single time we get the chance. And really, in the end, that's more than enough.